Fifth graders at a Pennsylvania elementary school have been putting on Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol for more than 40 years. It's a tradition at the school that brings the community together, where they can all go and watch little kids put on a Christmas play together and interact with their neighbors face to face. And it's a pretty sweet, homey little tradition. And now it's over. Why? Because apparently some parents complained about the play because of one of the lines by the character Tiny Tim. In the play, the little boy says, "God bless us, everyone." That is literally what some parents complained about because a little kid says the word God. And because of that, the school has now canceled the decades-long tradition. The community isn't going to get to watch adorable little kids be adorable this year because of the word God.
US President-elect Donald Trump has called for strengthening and expanding America's nuclear capability. It may be a coincidence, but Russian President Vladimir Putin also stressed the need to boost his country's nuclear defense readiness. Park Jung-hong has the details.
In a tweet posted on Thursday local time, Donald Trump said, quote, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." He didn't offer any further explanation. The Associated Press reported it may be related with a meeting with senior military officials the previous day. But what's raising eyebrows is that Trump's tweet came just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin called for enhancing his country's nuclear program. Putin said Moscow needs to, quote, "enhance the combat capability of strategic nuclear forces, primarily by strengthening missile complexes that'll be guaranteed to penetrate existing and future missile defense systems." What's more, he said the planned military buildup by the U.S.-led Western military alliance near Russia's borders could change the balance of power in the region. He stressed that Russia needs to quickly adapt plans for neutralizing threats to the country. Given the consecutive timing of the nuclear remarks, some watchers say the future of U.S.-Russia relations is looking unclear, and even the prospect of a nuclear arms race seems to be on the horizon. Park Jung-hong, Arirang News.
President-elect Donald Trump says the U.S. must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability. But how many nuclear warheads does America already have? Probably about 7,000. That's according to the Federation of American Scientists, which tracks the number of nuclear weapons around the world. But the exact number in each country's stockpile is a secret. The only country with more warheads than the US is Russia, with an estimated 7,300. The other countries with nuclear weapons include Pakistan, China, India, Israel, France, and the United Kingdom. Those 6 countries have a combined nuclear stockpile of about 1,100. No one really knows how Trump plans to strengthen the country's nuclear program, but the US hasn't produced a nuclear weapon since the end of the Cold War.
North Korea's former number 2 diplomat in London, Tae Yong-ho, who defected to South Korea in July, appeared at a closed-door meeting in Seoul's National Assembly today. He told South Korean lawmakers that the North goal for 2017 is to be recognized as a nuclear state. Meanwhile, the chief of Seoul's intelligence service says there are signs that Pyongyang may be planning another nuclear test sooner than later. Our Oh Jung-hee has the latest.
North Korea aims to be acknowledged as a nuclear state next year. That's what North Korea's former deputy ambassador to London, Tae Yong-ho, who defected to South Korea this past summer, told lawmakers on Friday at a closed-door meeting at the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee. He said North Korea wants to be recognized as a nuclear state like Pakistan and India through its party Congress next year and hopes to talk with the international community afterwards. The regime believes the appropriate timing for dialogue to be late 2017 or early 2018, when South Korea was originally scheduled to hold a presidential election and while the Trump administration in the U.S. would still be in its early stages. Meanwhile, it also appears that North Korea is preparing to conduct another nuclear test in view of circumstances in South Korea and the U.S. The chief of South Korea's National Intelligence Service, Lee Byung-ho, said at the same meeting that despite the winter cold, there has been active movement of people and vehicles at the North's Punggye-ri test site, and the third tunnel is prepared for a test. He also added that the North continues to develop its submarine-launched ballistic missiles, conducting experiments and preparing equipment for a new sub. According to him, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is focusing his scheduled activity on visiting military bases and observing drills. 오정희, 아리랑 뉴스.
The United States tops the list when it comes to the size of annual military budget, but that to nobody's surprise. But when taken as relative to its gross domestic product, the largest military spender in the world is North Korea, and that was during a decade between 2004 and 2014. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin has a list of the world's biggest spenders in beefing up their defense capabilities.
North Korea's annual military expenditure ranks highest in the world relative to its gross domestic product. According to the U.S. State Department's World Military Expenditures and Arms Transfers Report for 2016, North Korea spent $3.8 billion a year on its military on average between 2004 and 2014. That accounts for around 23% of the North's GDP of $15 billion. A distant second on the list is Oman at 11.4%. Saudi Arabia is ranked third at 8.6%. Spending 2.6% of its GDP on the military, South Korea came in 47th. In absolute terms, the United States easily topped the list at over $700 billion a year in military expenditures. South Korea was 11th, and North Korea 46th. In 2014 alone, the U.S. spent $656 billion, dwarfing China's $157 billion. In the latest figures for the Koreas, in 2014, the South spent $39 billion, and the North slightly over $4 billion. The United States is also in a league of its own in terms of arms exporting. It sold an average $120 billion worth of weapons to foreign countries a year during the period. Russia was second on the list, but with sales of just $8 billion. North Korea ranked 31st with around $100 million of annual arms exports. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The United States, Russia, and China are in a technological race to achieve air superiority on the globe. It's a race costing all three countries billions upon billions of dollars in research and development. President-elect Donald Trump met with officials from companies developing fighter jets and has addressed the expense of the next generation fighter. The competition between the countries mentioned has entered cyberspace. The attention in hacking surrounds accusations about Russian involvement in the U.S. election, although President Obama mentioned China in his last press conference.
The Chinese have in the past engaged in cyber attacks directed at our companies to steal trade secrets and proprietary technology. And I had to have the same conversation with President Xi, and what we've seen is some evidence that they have reduced, but not completely eliminated, these activities.
The follow-up to that soundbite that the president gave us in his last press conference got very little attention by the mainstream media. The Chinese hacking of military secrets is very well documented, and some fear the stealth technology in China's new J-20 jet fighter may have come from hacking classified American military material. The J-20 will challenge the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 for air superiority.
The North Pole is pretty dang hot. A weather buoy about 90 miles from Santa's headquarters recorded temperatures near 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the freezing point of fresh water. To put that in perspective, normal temps in the Arctic region this time of year hover around negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And they were already higher than normal. Temperatures reached negative 11 degrees on Tuesday, but in a span of 2 days jumped more than 40 degrees. One expert said that might have contributed to a major loss of sea ice. While the jump wasn't totally unexpected, it is cause for concern. This is the second time in the past 5 weeks the North Pole has experienced an unsettling increase. Experts fear if nothing is done to slow climate change, these kinds of warming events could happen far more frequently. The North Pole is pretty dang hot. A weather buoy about 90 miles from Santa's headquarters recorded temperatures near 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the freezing point of fresh water. To put that in perspective, normal temps in the Arctic region this time of year hover around -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and they were already higher than normal. Temperatures reached -11 degrees on Tuesday, but in a span of 2 days jumped more than 40 degrees. One expert said that might have contributed to a major loss of sea ice. While the jump wasn't totally unexpected, it is cause for concern. This is the second time in the past 5 weeks the North Pole has experienced an unsettling increase. Experts fear if nothing is done to slow climate change, these kinds of warming events could happen far more frequently.
Ranging from the rate of decline due to poaching and loss of habitat, conservationists warn that giraffes could soon be relegated to the history books. The Nubian giraffe, for example, considered a subspecies, has declined by 97% over the last 3 decades, and there's only 650 individuals left alive in the wild today. Now, it's not just giraffes. Thousands of species on Earth are currently on the absolute brink of extinction. African elephants, rhinos, orangutans, Sumatran tigers, giant pandas. There are less than 2,000 giant pandas left in the wild. Now, the fossil record shows that in the natural history of our planet, there have been 5 mass extinctions, seen here on this graph, the last occurring around 64 million years ago. The general consensus among scientists today is that we're already in the midst of yet another mass extinction event. And for most of the wildlife on Earth, it may already be too late.
Sadly, many thousands of species are already past the point of no return. They've been driven off the planet, and indeed by human activities. What has already been lost can't be reversed. And many of the extinctions that are imminent right now cannot be prevented. These species are just too much on the brink. Now, of course, many people say, well, isn't extinction just a natural phenomenon? And it certainly is. But it's important to recognize that this occurs at a natural background rate of about 1 to 5 species per year. But now we're losing species at a rate thousands of times greater the background rate.
The Islamic State has urged its followers to attack U.S. churches and has published names and addresses of thousands of prospective targets, according to a report in the news website Vocative. Messages posted in Arabic to the group's social media site called for bloody celebrations in the Christian New Year. The post said the Islamic State hopes to tap lone wolf attackers to turn the Christian New Year into a bloody horror movie, Vocative reports. Another post urged followers to attack churches, hotels, crowded coffee shops, streets, markets, and public places, and provided some examples in the U.S., Canada, France, and the Netherlands. The information on U.S. churches was based on information already available online and includes a public directory of churches across all 50 states, Vocative said. Cities across the U.S. have bolstered security around holiday events following the Berlin Christmas market attack that killed 12 people.
Well, the attack in Berlin comes less than a month after a 12-year-old boy attempted to detonate a bomb at another Christmas market in Western Germany. The boy of Iraqi origin was reportedly radicalized and directed by Islamic State. His case has added to fears that youngsters are now being recruited by terrorists to carry out attacks in Europe. Ilya Petrenko has more on the disturbing shift in tactics.
Caliphate Cubs, a squadron of underaged Islamic State soldiers. That's Wikipedia putting them prominently on the list of ISIL units fighting in the battle for Mosul. Here's a father blessing his son before the kid vanishes in a fireball from a suicide blast. And this brainwashed 4-year-old just blew up a group of ISIL captives with a push of a button. Sickening, but no longer that shocking for Westerners, as long as it's happening somewhere in the deserts of Iraq or Syria. Well, this is Berlin. What does it have to do with junior jihadists? That's a Christmas fair in another city, Ludwigshafen. It could have been turned into a bloodbath too, by a bomb allegedly put together by a 12-year-old ISIL sympathizer of Iraqi descent.
A devastating move from ISIL. The terrorist group posted a video online that reportedly shows 2 Turkish soldiers tortured and burned alive. The video was posted as a warning to Turkish president to withdraw from Syria. Turkey's military has admitted to losing 2 soldiers, but has not verified the identity of the men in the ISIL video. It also comes 2 days after the country suffered a major blow from ISIL, as 16 Turkish soldiers were killed by militants near the Syrian town of Al-Bab, with attacks that included 3 suicide bombings. The Turkish army announced on Friday it had killed over a dozen ISIL militants, including some high-ranking in the group, with airstrikes. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said civilians had also been killed by Turkish airstrikes in the region recently, while the Turkish government has denied this report. On Thursday, the defense minister gave an update on the Euphrates military operation launched in August, which aims to fight terrorists close to its borders.
2000 kilometre civarında bir alan.
A 2,000 square kilometer area was cleansed of terrorists. 225 districts were freed. Up until this day, within the Euphrates Shield operation, 1,005 terrorists from ISIL have been neutralized.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan emphasized that Turkey was going through one of its hardest periods in its fight against terror, and that to overcome this, Turkey needs to stand together, united as a nation.
Polisimiz, askerimiz,
our police, soldiers, and our nation will end this terror together. As long as we become one, stand strong as brothers, as we all become Turkey.
Biz tek milletiz. Türküyle.
We are one nation with the Turks, the Kurds, the Bosniak, Abkhaz, all 80 million.
80 milyon tek millet.
President Erdogan has not commented on ISIL's video so far, while opposition leaders have already been demanding an explanation. If the video is indeed verified and ISIL has burned to death Turkish soldiers, a heavy response can be expected by the Turkish government. Michal Vardavit, CCTV, Istanbul.
We have some quick headlines for you. The Obama administration doing away with a program that required immigrant men from Muslim nations to register with the federal government. This amid speculation over whether the incoming Trump administration might try to renew it. The Department of Homeland Security put out a notice yesterday officially removing what it called outdated regulations. But if those immigrants actually want to become a U.S. citizen the legal way, it's going to cost more. Starting today, application fees to apply for citizenship are jumping from $595 to $640 to keep up with the rising costs within the Citizenship and Immigration Agency. Steve?
All right, Ainsley, thank you very much.
The Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer. He is considered one of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's closest confidants and one of the few members of his inner circle. So this would be the highest level endorsement, or one of the highest level endorsements we've seen yet, of Trump's plan and his campaign promise to move the embassy from where it is now in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. What is it that Dermer said? Here are the comments he made, part of the comments he made at an embassy party for the holiday of Hanukkah. He said, "I hope that next year the U.S. ambassador to Israel lights the menorah in his embassy in Jerusalem, where the Maccabees lit it 2,200 years ago." Moving the embassy and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel would break with decades of U.S. foreign policy, which has held that the final status of Jerusalem is open to negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Jerusalem has always been intentionally an open-ended question, especially because it's one of the most sensitive and one of the most complex questions in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How is it that Palestinians have reacted to the idea of moving the embassy to Jerusalem? Well, predictably, they're furious. PLO Secretary General Saeb Erekat has said moving the embassy may violate international law, and he also said that the PLO would consider revoking their recognition of the State of Israel. Moving the embassy, therefore, may have some drastic consequences on not only Israeli-Palestinian relations, but also perhaps U.S.-Palestinian relations and U.S. relations with the Arab states in the region.
While supporting the evacuation process was our immediate priority, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Syria has also submitted a formal written request to the government of Syria seeking a blanket travel authorization to Aleppo for all UN senior staff in country, as well as humanitarian access to parts of Aleppo retaken by the government yesterday. And despite calls for an end to besiegement as a tactic of war, we end 2016 with hundreds of thousands of Syrian civilians, 700,000 to be precise, still trapped in besieged locations where humanitarians continue to struggle to gain access for aid.